Hey, it's Sam, and I'm talking about the 11th house in Vedic Astrology. The 11th house is the house of our highest desires, highest ambitions. It's a Kama house, it's the last Kama house, the last house of desire. So it's not our personal desire like the 3rd house, what I want for me. It's not the 7th house, what I want from other people. It's the 11th house, it's what I want for humanity in the highest sense, but usually it's a lot of ambition and competition with others. We live a life surrounded by other people, and feeling our place in that social structure is the 11th house. It's where the soul is trying to become universalized and not personalized. Remember, in the 9th house we found a teacher to help expand our consciousness beyond all the stuff we can't control. We need to find teachings that help us understand the nature of life. And then in the 10th house we want those teachings to impact the world. Once we get higher wisdom about the nature of the world, it shifts everything. It shifts our values, because those 9th house teachings shift our 1st house awareness of who we are, and then that changes our 2nd house values. My values are different, I want to impact the world different in the 10th house. So then we get a certain amount of power in the 10th house, a certain amount of impact, and with that impact comes ambition. You want to understand that the 10th house comes before the 11th house. Again, I'm just going to say I don't see these two houses delineated clearly very much. They're both kind of like, oh yeah, well, excuse me, oh yeah, well, the 10th house, oh, that's your work, that's great. 11th house, oh, that's great, that's, you know, this whole thing that planets do well in the 11th house, one of these things you just hear all the time. I don't know how some of these things get going. It's a house of ambition, so if a planet is in the 11th house, we're going to use it like crazy to try to win. If you say that's doing, quote, well, I don't know. It's a cruel house because it takes us away from our dharma and our purpose, and it's very externalized, its highest ambitions. And the difference is that we get a certain amount of power in the 10th house, and then with that power we have ambition toward to use the power. So I use the example of, you know, first we have to have a certain amount of power. Like, for example, like my ambitions now are a reflection of a certain amount of power that I have. I don't have the ambition to do something, first of all, that's less power than I have, right? 5 years ago, when I had less power, quote, you would say, my ambition was to be maybe where I am now, as an example. The power I have now isn't to then go back, or it's to go forward in some way or in some measure based on the power I have. Based on the power I have, like I have the ambition to get more people to watch my videos or to get more people in my courses. Those are my ambitions. I don't have the ambition to play for the NBA. I'm only 5'10", I'd never be able to do it, and I'm in my 50s. And I say this, it doesn't mean that our ambitions can't be like irrational and really high. Sometimes they are, but the thing to understand about transforming our ambitions, some rowers here, I haven't seen this in the 11th house, people rowing. Transforming our ambitions is transforming that desire in the moment, because I want you to understand the way this house feels in your mind. It takes the power you have and it shows, oh, I could do this, and there's a stress about it. There's a stress about the 11th house, and the stress is that I want to be the one to win. In a very typical sense, you can say it's like this. Somebody, let's say they're working at a company and they're up for a promotion. Well, I want to be the one who gets it. How do I get the promotion? And then what's the next rung of the ladder? What's the next rung? It's like the next rung of the ladder in a very mundane sense. You have to understand that next rung of the ladder is very much us in competition with others. not us necessarily in service to others. So that highest quality of the 11th house is in fact service, and you'll hear this word used sometimes when you talk about the 11th house. Often I don't frankly hear it explained very well. It's often just planets do well, you make a lot of money, you get a lot of achievement and accomplishment. But again, none of those things has anything to do with whether you're going to be happy, whether you're learning anything, nothing. And again, maybe because it's just my point of view, I like to understand the point of something, not just what it looks like, and they're both possible. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. You can still say planets in the 11th house often produce the results, the external result that we want, but it's often because we're blind to the more intuitive side, because it's a karma house. It's our highest desire, literally, and we all have it. And in the highest sense, it's a beautiful thing. You know, like my highest desire, and the reason I do the things I do is it's a very high thing, you know, to bring astrology to the world. I want the whole world to know how amazing this is. Now, it doesn't have to be me saying it, but it would be nice if it is. Kidding. No, but, you know, in that spirit, of course, I'm not the only astrologer in the world, so one could say, oh, that there's a competitiveness to that energy. There can be. It doesn't necessarily have to be. But it's that stress of, I want it to be me, not them, like let's say at work, or that's the difficult quality of the 11th house. And this is what it does in the mind relative to the power we have. So again, you want to try to keep the 10th and 11th houses kind of buttoned up together, because the effect to eclipse your mind or to eclipse your peace of mind is big with the 11th house. It does have to do with the highest gains, and it is absolutely true. Every astrologer who says this is absolutely right. When you get a bunch of planets in the 11th house, you'll often see enormous achievement, because it's like our greatest gains too. It's the highest gain, because it's the highest ambition, because it's the highest desire. But you want to take away the idea that it necessarily is good, or that getting a whole lot of stuff is good. And I mean, I don't mean this judgmentally, I mean as a function of consciousness. Is there really any correlation to people who have a lot of stuff and spiritual growth or happiness? It almost seems like an inverse proportion. It almost seems more rare, you know, the sort of Oprah type of person who has all this money and all this stuff and seems pretty at peace and sort of spiritual. Most of the time it seems like, especially celebrity types or people that, you know, if we get a lot of accomplishment and gain without a commensurate level of wisdom and intelligence, or certainly earning it in a pure way, or earning it because it's connected to our values, again, back to the 10th house, if we're really connected to our heart and our values, and then we pursue our ambitions, well, then that's wonderful. Which is the thing that I was just talking about, like with me, like say with my other colleagues who, you know, me as a teacher or them as a teacher, anyone who's doing something like this, like astrology, for example, usually it's pretty clear to see this is not the first thing anybody would do to try to make a lot of money, because it's not a good career move, usually. So people that do it are following their higher purpose. So even though they put their stuff out, there's enormous amount of camaraderie amongst the practitioners, and there's a respect for something higher that's always there. So even if, you know, those of us who maybe are more successful or who make more money or who all of this, you know, I could make gobs and gobs and gobs of money and it wouldn't, quote, go to my head. I already know. Because it's just not that, that's not the point. Or gobs and gobs of mega success, it wouldn't go to my head, because it's already grounded, because the way I'm doing it is already so grounded in something that's pure. So the purity of the ambition, or the purity of the values in the 10th house and of the pursuit, is what determines whether or not the 11th house achievements and accomplishments and desires will yield a sweet or bitter fruit. But understand that the 11th house in general is going. Its energy feels. It feels cruel. It feels harsh when we're in it, because it is a destabilizing factor, and it's a destabilizing factor that can make us successful, of course, because it's unsatisfied. It's desire. This is what karma is. Karma is unbalancing. It's where energy is not stable. We're desiring something. In the third house, we're desiring something for ourselves. I have a desire, sexual desire, physical desire, intellectual desire. I want this thing. From a very balanced state, now I want something, I have desire. 7th house, I have a desire for this thing with another person. 11th house, I have this desire for the whole world. You can see how it's unsettling, because it's our high desires. And we all have it, and in many ways it's why we incarnated. We incarnate in the highest sense to fulfill that high desire of the 11th house. We don't incarnate to, to do small stuff. When people are stuck in the smaller stuff, they kind of maybe overlook the higher stuff. But this is what makes people say things like, they're in a bad relationship, or their life is kind of clunking around at a very low level. But in the back of their mind, they have this dream, oh God, if I could win the lottery, then kaka. Some people are very disconnected from that. Some people are a little closer. Like if people are closer to really accomplishing their life's purpose and doing the work that they really love or whatever, they don't dream about winning the lottery anymore, because they're actually closer to that, to the reality of the 11th house. When someone's really, really far away from it, that highest desire of like, wow, wouldn't that just be the most amazing thing ever, is attached to something like lottery or whatever. It's equally destabilizing, because it's our highest desires, and we keep incarnating until all the desires are done. And it's said that the 11th house is the highest ones. But it's not till we get to the 12th house that they're completely finished. So what happens is eventually in the 11th house we stop competing with others, competing with ourselves, and it just becomes service. And the soul becomes universalized through this world of people and culture, and we make peace with all the ups and downs, the gains and losses, the wins, the losses, this person, that person. It all becomes less important. Like I was saying with like astrology, or when someone is doing their thing, they just have reverence. Of course they have ambition because they want to succeed and they want to all that, but all of the tangled up, oh, I lost, they won, all that stuff that can be big in the lower quality of the 11th house goes away. One last example that I used to use, think of a politician who is about to, rise up in life. The power that he has is in the 10th house, and then his ambitions are maybe, let's say, to become president or something. But then let's say there's a scandal. Then, there's a scandal. It destroys him, takes away all his power in the 10th house. Now his ambition is to just stop being in the news. I remember there was a politician a few years ago, John Edwards, in the U.S. election, 2008 now. I've been telling this story for a while, but he was almost being considered to be, like a cabinet pick, or maybe, that he would be really high. It was in the 2008 election. And then a sex scandal came. And now, instead of his ambition to maybe be, Attorney General, his ambition was to get off the front page of the Inquirer. So 11th house is our ambitions, our highest ambitions. And that literally was his highest ambitions. So you can see how they change. You can see how they're not necessarily good or bad. And they're congruent with the amount of power that we have. As we get more power, our ambitions become greater. As our power is dialed more in connection with our values, then the 11th house is less about winning and more about serving. So, very complex house.